Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of Southern Woke. I'm Kalen.
And I'm Marina. And today we're going to be talking about something that has maybe crossed your mind recently with the recent tragedy that happened when those 5 men went on their Ocean Gate submersible to see the Titanic wreckage and did not come back. Today we're going to be talking about the Titanic itself and what tragedy that was, and also some conspiracies surrounding the sinking of it, or if it sunk at all.
So, I'm sure I was about to say most of us have seen the movie by now. But I can't say that because Marina has not seen the movie. People make fun of me all the time for not seeing movies. And I've even seen that.
Okay, I'll take the shit for it because A, I don't like watching old movies. And B, I don't like watching movies that I know are gonna make me cry. Period.
Yeah, it might make you cry, honestly. But it's
I don't
also not that
feel
old.
Things. It's old to me.
I guess made by the same guy that made Avatar.
Well, Leo looked like a baby in that movie, so it's pretty old because he's like an old man now. But
so anyway,
anyways.
If you've seen the movie, you know the main premise of it. But we're going to run over the background of the Titanic real fast before we jump into some of the juicy conspiracies surrounding its sinkage or apparently non-sinkage. In 1911, an Irish shipbuilder named William Peary created his absolute masterpiece, the Titanic. There was so much hype at the time about this vessel, which was said to be the world's fastest ship, and even more importantly, it was said to be invincible. It cost him around $7.95 million to build the vessel that was 883 feet long, with its hull divided into 16 different watertight compartments. The idea was that if 4 of the compartments flooded, the ship still wouldn't lose buoyancy, and it would be able to stay afloat. I had no idea about that. That's really kind of cool.
Yeah, I learned a lot actually researching this because I didn't really care to learn about the Titanic in the past, but like I said, this whole tragedy piqued my interest and I learned a hell of a lot that was like, what the hell?
Right? So the invincible vessel departed from Southampton, Texas? Texas, Jesus God.
Texas? Southampton, yes.
From Southampton, England in 1912 on a voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. 2,240 passengers and crew members were along for the voyage to New York City, traveling at full speed while the captains attempted to break a record. So they wanted to make this biggest ship ever break like a speed record, which honestly doesn't sound great to me.
No, there's a possible good explanation for that later on.
So, just before midnight on April 14th, the vessel entered dangerous waters filled with icebergs. But this would be no problem for the Titanic, the world's fastest and most invincible vessel. The Titanic failed to divert its course from one of these icebergs, and it ruptured at least 5 of its hull compartments. And maybe you're asking yourself, how did they not see a giant iceberg? Isn't there usually a person that stays at the very top of the ship to watch for things like icebergs? Like in the crow's nest? True, it was dark, but they also received 6 ice warnings before the collision. At the time of the collision, the boat was supposedly moving at 22.5 knots, when its max speed was 23 knots. It's reported that the time between when the iceberg was first spotted and when they collided was 30 seconds.
That's not a lot of time to really even panic.
Yeah, you have no way of reacting at that point. What do you do? Just shout to everybody, brace for impact.
Mm-hmm.
Well, upon impact, the hull compartments began filling up with water, and the bow of the boat began to sink. Because the hull compartments weren't capped on the top, water continued to fill in, and the stern began to rise up out of the water as the bow sank. This caused the boat to turn vertical and eventually snap in half, with many of the passengers still on board. And if you haven't seen the movie, the boat literally turns completely up on its side, in the air, almost looks comical, then it just snaps in half when it sinks. It was insane.
Yeah, that's 800 feet of just verticalness.
So as the boat began sinking, it took nearly an hour before the first lifeboat launched. That morning, they were supposed to have a lifeboat drill, but the captain had canceled it without explanation. Even more tragically, it was quickly realized that they only had half the amount of lifeboats needed to save everybody aboard. This ended up resulting in the death of 1,500 people.
More.
Yeah, possibly more. Can you imagine, like, in all this panic, you just realize that, like, 1,500 of you have to die, and y'all are just, like, choosing who lives and who dies, and you're just sitting there, like...
Yeah,
my God.
like...
I also think about the people in the boats, like, watching their family members just get left behind to drown, and you know it's, like, the worst death ever, like, drowning.
Yeah, I can't imagine. But it was said that, like, they had so much faith in the Titanic being the unsinkable ship that they only provided, like, half the amount. I'm like, that's what kind of
like
logic?
What's the point of that? Like, it was designed into it, like, if there's a failure, half of y'all just have to die. I don't know, it's the price for an invincible ship, I guess. Like, what the hell? It sank 400 miles to the south of Newfoundland, Canada. It only took 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink the unsinkable ship, which compared to other shipwrecks is very fast. Many notable American and British citizens died, like British journalist William Thomas Stead and heirs to the Stoss.
Yeah, the Stouse, I think is how you say it. Astor and Guggenheim fortunes. I knew Kaylin wouldn't be able to pronounce those.
1 hour and 20 minutes after the collision, the Carpathia... God bless these names, man.
You said it right, the Carpathia, I think.
The sea ship arrived and picked up the survivors, most of them women and children. It was later discovered that a ship called the Californian was less than 20 miles away at the time of the impact, but failed to hear the Titanic's distress signal because the radio operator was off-duty sleeping. If they would have noticed, a lot more people could have been saved. You know, like, I feel like he was probably allowed to sleep, probably.
Yeah, but you should have another guy take his place.
I agree, but, like, I feel like he probably feels, like, really guilty. Like, he killed all 1,500 of them.
Or maybe it was planned to be that way. Over 100 years ago, when stuff like this happened, authorities would tell the public what happened, and they would just believe it as truth. But it's 2023 now, and we have the receipts, and we can see what appears to be some kind of cover-up, or at least, like, I don't know. I'm pretty convinced at this point that it was. So, let's get into the conspiracies. So, number one is the Titanic was actually the Olympic ship. It wasn't the real Titanic that sunk. So, the Titanic was owned by the White Star Line ship line, I guess. And they also owned a ship called the Olympic, which was called, like, the Titanic's sister. It was discovered that the Olympic had been in an accident and hit another boat a few months before the Titanic's departure, but the owners of the White Star Line didn't have the funds to complete the building of the Titanic and fix the damage to the Olympic. So the Olympic's accident was also, like, their fault, so the insurance companies weren't gonna cough up any money for them to make their repairs. What's interesting to note here, though, is that the captain of the Olympic during the accident with the other boat was also the same captain on the Titanic when it sank. So, like, why didn't they just fire his ass if he just literally hit a whole ass other boat? They're supposed to be a top-tier cruise line. Well, that's not a cruise, a ship line.
Like, there's some professions in life that you can mess up in and it's okay. Like, if you're a server and you spill some food on somebody, like, you mess up. We all make mistakes. Move on to see another day. When you crash a ship the size of the Titanic, you don't get a second chance.
Think if a plane hit another plane. Do you think that pilot's gonna fly again? No.
Exactly.
Or at least
But
we
no, they were just
hope
like,
the
look,
fuck not.
this guy knows best. He's been a captain for 33 years, Henry. He'll be all right.
So it's believed that the White Star Line CEO and chairman, J. Bruce Ismay, came up with the idea to switch the ships and sink the Olympic and collect that insurance money. And take a guess at who owned the White Star Line as a whole, if you haven't cheated and peeked already.
I have already cheated and peeked.
Okay. Well, if you guys guessed JP Morgan, you would be correct. He owned the Titanic, the Olympic, the whole line. So instead of having to delay the Titanic's journey, they switched her with the Olympic, which was repaired quickly and renovated to look exactly like her younger sister. By allowing the wounded ship to set sail as the Titanic, the company could then collect the insurance payment when it struck the iceberg and sank. I learned in my research that around this time period, insurance schemes were pretty popular. I don't know why. Maybe insurance became a thing at that time and they finally learned how to take advantage of it. I don't know. But it was popular. Apparently, they arranged for the Californian to be nearby to rescue them because, of course, I would hope they wouldn't want to kill 2,000 plus people. And evidence for this is that the Californian was just chilling out there for no reason, and it was a passenger ship, so people should have been on it, but it was literally just full of empty rooms. So they were prepared to take aboard all these people in case of this tragedy.
Here's my only problem with that theory. So, yes, I could definitely believe they sunk it for insurance money, but with the ship sitting out there, I feel like that's probably not part of it, because if they orchestrated this whole thing and orchestrated that ship to be out there, to save them, I feel like the captain wouldn't, or the person wouldn't just fall asleep. If he knew that he had to save people's lives, he's not going to just doze off on that one.
You would think so.
Sorry, JP, I fell asleep.
Yeah, it is pretty sus. But also, what else are they just doing chilling out there? I don't know.
That's also sus, but who knows? Maybe they were guys, we've had a rough
smuggling.
week. Let's just hit the water and...
But, the Titanic was shooting flares, and it still didn't catch their attention. And theorists believe that it was never the intention to hurt anyone on board, but to slowly sink the ship and get everyone to safety before real danger arose. But we know that did not happen. And another little story to support the swap theory is a man in Australia sent a letter to Northern Star newspaper on July 31st, 1996 that talked about a conversation with his son Paddy. When the surviving crew got out of the port, they were taken to the side by two men, one in a high position in the company and the other in a high position of the government. The government man read the crew an official secret act explaining that if they told the real reason for the sinking or rumors of an insurance scam, that they would serve a minimum of 20 years in jail and would never find a job afterwards. But that's all according to what this dude's son said.
Can you imagine, you just got rescued from the Titanic, the worst disaster in history, and the first thing that happens, you get on shore and this guy's like, don't you tell anybody about the insurance fraud rumors or else I'm ruining your life.
Yeah. And do we really think that could be so out of the realm of possibilities when literally last week we were talking about the illegal secret government?
No, definitely think that could be real.
Okay. And also, there were some physical differences between the Titanic and the Olympic that people say, the pictures of the Titanic setting sail, these pictures were the same as parts of the Olympic. So when the Olympic hit the British Navy boat in their little accident, it caused a left tilt to the boat, and there was actually a science teacher guy on the Titanic that wrote in his journal that on the first night that the Titanic itself had a left tilt to it. So both of these new boats had this left tilt, or it was just one of them. And the Olympic and the Titanic had slightly different windows, but the day the Titanic set sail, it definitely appears to be the Olympic windows. And then another one is that apparently there's a different number of portholes. But I tried to look up a video that we could watch on YouTube or something to see if we could see these differences, if anyone was talking about them, and I guess in my little 20-minute search I just could not find anything because all of them were showing like the inside of the Titanic and like the different layouts because they were like ship nerds. I don't know. But we're gonna have to find those pictures and post them and really compare them.
I actually brought up the Titanic conspiracy to some people at work today, and somebody was saying something about the windows on the Olympic and the Titanic, and I was like, oh wow, it's crazy.
Yeah, so I guess it is pretty true. Okay, so now our next thing is we're gonna blame all of this on JP Morgan.
I have one quick thing about the Olympic. So what, like, if we're going with that theory, then what happened to the actual Titanic?
It stayed in the shipyard.
So, like, the Titanic's just in a shipyard somewhere? They're just hiding this huge-ass ship?
Well, they don't have to hide it because they made it appear as though it's the Olympic.
Okay, so I guess that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
So, like, then we made that look like the other one? Okay.
Yeah, because, like, the Titanic was built to look just like the Olympic, but with, like, bigger and better changes or whatever. So then, whenever the Olympic got into that accident, they just, instead of finishing the Titanic, they renovated it to make it look like this new Titanic. That was really the Olympic, if that makes sense. I was going on a lot of different paths in my head.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to blaming Mr. Morgan. As we already established, he was the owner of the White Star Line, and he also originally had booked the presidential suite on the Olympic for this particular voyage, but he ended up backing out because he was feeling sick, as if he's not rich enough to bring a doctor with him or something to enjoy this record-breaking boat ride across the Atlantic. Some believe it's because he planned this whole thing. And he's not the only notable person to back out, though. Milton Hershey, like the guy that made the Hershey chocolate bar, also canceled his trip last minute. It's believed the Titanic was sunk on purpose to eliminate opposition to the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank. Because guys like JP Morgan and the guy that owned Hershey, they all wanted these privately owned banks because it would benefit them. Several people that died on the boat were some of the wealthiest in the world, and it's been said that Morgan planned to kill Benjamin Guggenheim, Asa Strauss, and Jacob Astor, 3 wealthy men who opposed the creation of the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank. Allegedly, Morgan instructed his staff to ignore the warnings of the icebergs and withheld safety gear like lifeboats or red signal flares, which is contradictory to the theory before because it said that Titanic was throwing flares. Or maybe he just didn't give them enough. I don't know. Interestingly, Jacob Astor was also a good friend of Nikola Tesla. And Nikola Tesla and his bubble did not get along with JP Morgan and his bubble. Some believe that JP Morgan was inspired by a book called The Wreck of the Titan, which is crazy in itself. That was written in 1878 by Morgan Robertson. It's basically a psychic prediction of what happened to the actual Titanic. It involves some of the world's wealthiest men going down on an unsinkable ship on her maiden voyage. Both were around 800 feet long, both were going about the same speed, both of them sank in April, and both of them were hit on the same side of the boat by an iceberg and killed a large number of people.
So there's two possibilities here. Either this person is absolutely psychic that wrote this book, or he was inspired by it and actually did this horrible thing. Because if there's actually a book out there called Wreck of the Titan that predicts that accurately, like, that is insane.
I know. And how creepy is it that, like, it's called the Titan, and then the Titan submersible thing. It's all just weird. So this next thing isn't really a conspiracy. It's indeed a fact, but it definitely makes you, like, go, what the hell? So this guy, Senan Maloney, a journalist from Ireland, has studied the Titanic for over 30 years, and probably about 5 to 6 years ago now, he came across a collection of Titanic pictures from the shipbuilding firm from before it left the shipyard. One of the pictures showed a 30-foot long dark mark on the hull right where the iceberg would eventually hit. Engineers have determined the mark was from a coal fire that took place in the coal bunker. It's said to have started 10 days before the Titanic left for her maiden voyage, with crews unable to put the fire out. In general, coal fires are extremely difficult to deal with, and I'm no fire expert, but apparently the only way to put out the fire in the bunker with the coal was to put the burning coal into the ship's furnace. The area in the coal bunker where the fire broke out was against one of the main bulkheads of the ship, and these are watertight walls designed to keep seawater from spreading in case of the hull breach. The testimony of the coal stokers and firefighters aboard the Titanic seems to indicate that the bulkhead by the coal area was significantly damaged by the fire. Some even reported of movement of the metal or a buckling. Nothing was done to address the damage. Remember how it was said that the Titanic was trying to break a record for traveling across the Atlantic faster than anyone had before? Well, the Titanic was not built for speed. It was a luxury liner. It's not meant to just go cruising super fast across the ocean. The excessive speed could have been caused by the firefighting on board. In order to fight the fire, the stokers had been shoveling the burning coal into furnaces to burn the fire away. So, like, there's this big fire, all these coals are on fire, and they're, like, throwing it into the furnace because these boats run off of coal. And I don't know the exact science behind it, but it makes
sound like
sense,
so
right?
ignorant here, but, like, why don't they just take the coals and, like, throw them overboard into the water?
Because I don't know. I'm
They're
no
like, let's throw it in the hot
expert.
furnace and make them even hotter.
But apparently, like, you have to be really careful with coal fires because, like, one wrong move and it'll explode. So, oh my gosh, my throat just got really itchy.
Dude, I'm just picturing the captain, like, why the hell is the ship going so fast? And he's, like, calling down there, like, is everything okay down there? And they're just, like, shoveling coal and, like, trying to put the fire out, and it's just making the ship go faster and faster.
Because, like, that would make more sense to me than them literally just ignorantly going through the water super fast, knowing that there's icebergs. They've got 6 warnings. Right after the iceberg strike, the bulkhead compartments appear to be doing their job holding the water back. The Titanic's designer was aboard the ship and evaluated the strike damage, and seemed to think the ship wouldn't sink as long as the bulkheads held up. However, one of the main bulkheads reportedly had been damaged in the fire. So why the hell would anyone let the Titanic sail across the ocean with an out-of-control fire below deck that literally started 10 days before? Money, that's why. The introduction of the Titanic had already been delayed, and the Olympic was out of commission from its own wreck. Maybe the fire was even planned to make sure that the ship was weakened when it hit the iceberg. Or maybe their plan was just to have a fire that would damage enough for a fat insurance check. So, I don't know. But the fire was definitely proven to be true. They really just sailed across the ocean blue with a fire roaring downstairs.
I really thought you were going to make that rhyme. I was really looking forward to it.
I know, but I couldn't. I didn't know any words that would rhyme. Okay, now this last theory is pretty short because it's pretty freaking ridiculous.
Marina gave this one like half of a paragraph.
I know, because like literally there's not much to talk about because it's okay. Some people believe that it's the fault of a mummy that was on board the ship, and we all know the stories of like you take a mummy out of its resting place from Egypt and you've got the Pharaoh's curse type of thing.
Yeah, I think we talked about it in the podcast.
For sure. And it was said that an ancient Egyptian curse left by a mummified princess who caused a trail of death and devastation across England in the early 1900s was on the ship. This haunted mummy was excavated and removed from Egypt and was sold by a British art collector to an American archaeologist, and he allegedly brought this mummy on the Titanic to bring back to America. But it's been proven that there was no mummy on there. I don't know how that was proven, but it's pretty sure.
I feel like that's got to be weird, like bringing a mummy on board with you, like it's definitely like person shaped and everybody's looking at you like you're like a freak. Like how do you even transport that around and not look super weird?
I know.
All right, y'all, and now for the conspiracy that everybody's actually waiting for. Could Jack have fit on the door? Marina's not even gonna know what I'm talking about here because she hasn't freaking
But I know
seen
the
it.
premise because I read a story of like how people were like on the door and like I know the backstory.
Yeah. If you don't, two main characters are in the water about to die and there's a floating door and the girl gets on top of the door and the guy is like in the water and he just drowns and dies and everybody's constantly fighting saying they both could fit on the door, like he didn't have to die, and that's been like a debate forever. So James Cameron decided to actually put this to the test, and he got a giant swimming pool and he actually got it to the temperature that the water was. He got two actors, dressed them up just like from the movie, got a replica of the door, put it in the swimming pool, put them in there, and made them climb on the door. And y'all had to see them in this water. Like, they were shivering uncontrollably. Like, they were, like, in pain. It looked, like, rough. And so they were on the door, and they could both fit on the door. But when they both sat on the door, it began to sink. So it is proven that they both could not have survived and have been on the door.
Were the doors made out of the same material?
It's a great question that I don't have the answer to.
Yeah, because I feel like a wooden door would do a little bit better than like a steel door.
It was definitely a wooden door. I don't think steel floats. Maybe some steel.
I don't fucking know. Just a thought. So, do you think that the Titanic accident was just completely an accident? Or do you think something was behind it?
If it was an accident, then that's like seriously the same thing that happened with this Titan submersible all over again, where it was just like way too many red flags were ignored. They were way too cocky and like thought that they were amazing when like they clearly weren't. And because of it, other people paid the cost. So I don't know. I'd like to think that people wouldn't kill this many people or try to for money like that, but we live in a crazy world, so I really wouldn't doubt it if it ended up being true. But either way, it's horrible either way how you look at it.
It is. But because JP Morgan is involved, I fully believe that he had a plan, some way, somehow, that boat was gonna get damaged. And I believe it's pretty possible that Californian was, like, he didn't want to kill those people in case things went bad, so he wanted a plan B for them. And what better way to have just another boat out there that's completely empty and that can carry all 2,000 plus people. And I think he was just really fucking money hungry. They had built up this Titanic for so long, and it almost, like, if the Titanic didn't set sail when it did, it would have, like, probably bankrupted them. So, as always, we want to know what you guys think.
I guess if, like, it's easy to just sit from, like, my perspective right now and say, like, oh, who would kill so many people, like, just for some money? But I guess if you were so financially tied into this that, like, you're going to lose everything in your entire life and your status and your family and all these other people connected to you are going to lose all kinds of money too if you don't somehow, like, pull this money out of your ass. I feel like you could drive people to do something as crazy as that. So maybe it is a little more believable.
Yeah. And, I mean, look at Alex Murdoch. He killed his own wife and son for money type of things.
And, like, he was, like, a person that, like, loved his family at some point, and, like, but, like, when you're so driven with, like, stress and all this other craziness, it's wild.
All right, well, that's all that we've got for today. Y'all be sure to follow our TikTok and subscribe to our YouTube channel. New videos every Tuesday. And follow us on Instagram. Check out our website, southernwoke.com. You can, like, send us a little, like, topic suggestion on there. Leave us a voicemail. It's a fun time. So, and we have some blogs over there. So yeah, come connect with us.
Yep, and we will see y'all in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.
All right, bye y'all.